Today on Central Illinois on the Record, debate number 3 for the GOP. We've got reaction to the showdown in Colorado. Plus, striking one last deal, how John Boehner and President Obama cleared the way into 2017. And is it gambling or strategy? Why lawmakers are taking a look at daily fantasy games.
Now, from your local election headquarters, this is Central Illinois on the Record.
Welcome to Central Illinois on the Record. I'm Paul Cicchini. The state has now gone 124 days without a budget. Lawmakers were supposed to set a spending plan by June 30th. With no resolution in sight, some say it's time to shake things up in the Capitol. Leaders in the General Assembly and the governor have not met since May. Thanks to some ambitious groups in Chicago, the big meeting might be on the horizon. That's because good government groups invited the 4 legislative leaders and governor to a budget summit. They accepted, something never done before.
Outside groups would come in and direct or orchestrate how negotiations were taking place over the budget would seem, strange.
Experts say if it stays public, you shouldn't expect detailed negotiations. The governor's office wrote to the groups saying it will organize the meeting. A man in Morton being hailed a hero by Governor Rauner after he saved a group of kids from an attempted knife attack. But James Vernon was already a hero, having served his country in the 60s. 5 decades later, the 76-year-old is being recognized for what he did when a man with 2 knives tried to attack children inside the Morton Library. Many parents and teachers agree students are spending too much time on tests, and President Obama is on board. His administration is calling for limits on testing in schools. This year was the first for the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers, or PARCC test, for students in the state. Now, some teachers say it was difficult and very time-consuming. According to a study by the Great City Schools, the average student will take about 112 tests from K through 12th grade. Most teachers agree standards are necessary, but it's gone too far.
I feel like we are constantly testing our kids, and having seen the PARCC testing from a teacher and a parent perspective last year, a great deal of classroom time was lost.
President Obama would like to cap an assessment so no child would spend more than 2% of classroom time taking tests. The Mitsubishi plant in Normal is expected to close early next year, leaving hundreds unemployed. Over 30 years, it's taken hundreds of millions of dollars from the state in incentives. Capitol Bureau Chief Matt Porter has more on whether it's a practice the state should continue.
It would be devastating to us employees, number one, to the general economy.
The closure of the Mitsubishi plant in Normal has raised a new question. Should any employer be given incentives to take it over?
Well, sure. It would just help our cause that much more. Plus, it'd be beneficial for them. It's kind of an investment for them.
But Mitsubishi got more than $7 million in Illinois Edge incentives to stay since 2011. It still decided to leave and lay off its more than 1,200 workers.
In the last couple of deals, the tax credits were given and then the employers laid off people. That leaves a sour taste in everybody's mouth.
The question now is whether the new owner of the plant should be given the same tax incentives as Mitsubishi.
It's huge. It can't just be closed and forgotten. Something is going to have to be done.
Governor Bruce Rauner has criticized the EDGE program for not doing its job, which could make it more difficult for the next company to get them. But experts say the state, along with federal and local governments, will have to make an offer.
Few employers are just going to swoop down and take over an older plant and not expect something back from the government.
The Mitsubishi plant will stop building cars at the end of November, closing by the end of May next year. Well, the good news, there are open jobs in Illinois. The bad, according to one report, the state's having a hard time filling those positions. The John Howard Association says some of these vacancies stay open as long as 8 months, leaving prisons, in many cases, understaffed. Several factors are responsible for slowing down the hiring process, particularly in corrections.
Starting background checks earlier, hiring more people to conduct background checks.
Those delays send qualified candidates elsewhere for work. The John Howard Association hopes this report will help the state fill some of those jobs more quickly. Illinois doesn't have any laws in place to tackle drone use, but a new task force should help put rules in place for pilots and the unmanned aircraft themselves. This week, Governor Rauner named its members representing law enforcement, agriculture, and the business community. Most laws on the books in other states deal with defining drones and how they can be used by law enforcement, other state agencies, the public, and hunters. Local pilots say they would like to see something done.
The Flying 20 Club that we have approximately 50 members that we get together and we discuss these kind of subjects in what we need to do in order to avoid unmanned aircraft.
The task force has until July 2016 to submit its recommendations. A new statewide poll shows 9 out of 10 people disapprove of the job lawmakers are doing. More than 4 months have passed without a budget, and members have produced little to no results in solving the stalemate.
Sessions that we've had through the summer and into the fall really haven't produced anything substantive. We continue to have these committees of the whole, which I think are just pandering to the public.
Democratic Speaker Michael Madigan pulled a 12% approval rating in the poll. The Republican governor, nearly 40%. Former House Speaker Dennis Hastert will be sentenced in February after reaching a plea deal with federal prosecutors. Hastert pleaded guilty to charges of lying to investigators. Prosecutors recommended 6 months in prison, but a judge will decide how much time the Republican will spend behind bars. Sources with knowledge of the probe say Hastert was paying a former student to stay quiet about allegations of sexual abuse when he was a coach and teacher in Illinois. Hastert served as Speaker of the House from 1999 to 2007. Still ahead, a hometown paper calls on Marco Rubio to resign. What the editors are saying about his work or lack thereof in the Senate. And breaking down the debate, a look at what Republicans had to say when they met on stage in Colorado. Many pundits are saying Wednesday night's Republican debate was a breakout night for Marco Rubio. But as Sunlen Servati explains, questions remain as to whether Rubio can translate his debate victory into more money and a higher ranking in the polls.
New momentum for Marco Rubio.
We can't afford to have another 4 years like the last 8 years.
His strong debate performance could be a breakout moment for his campaign.
The Democrats have the ultimate super PAC. It's called the mainstream media.
But Rubio trying to temper the hype.
Well, we felt good about it, as we did with the other 2 debates. The election wasn't decided last night, and we're going to have another debate in 14 days, and that'll replace in people's memory this one.
Some damage controlled from the Bush campaign after Rubio had the debate their candidate needed.
Marco is obviously a very talented debater. Marco has some good zingers. In the broader debate over who do voters trust to do the job, Marco's been in the Senate for 6 years, and he hasn't done anything.
The other struggling candidates did what they could to break through.
I want to tell you, my great concern is that we are on the verge, perhaps, of picking someone who cannot do this job.
We have $19 trillion in debt. We have people out of work. We have ISIS and Al-Qaeda attacking us. And we're talking about fantasy football? Can we stop?
And despite being center stage, the spotlight mostly avoided the frontrunners. Donald Trump and Ben Carson seemed to play it safe.
Such a nasty question, but thank you, Governor.
You're welcome.
Both fading into the background at times, providing an opening for another insurgent candidate, Ted Cruz, to stand out by taking on the moderators.
How about talking about the substantive issues people care about?
Ben Carson today also taking aim at CNBC.
What it's turned into is a gotcha. That's silly.
And is trying to organize the other Republican candidates to push for changes to their next big encounter in less than 2 weeks.
Debates are supposed to be established to help the people get to know the candidates and get to know what's behind them.
A newspaper in Florida is calling on Senator Marco Rubio to resign his seat. The Fort Lauderdale Sun-Sentinel says the Republican is ripping off the people of Florida. The paper says Rubio is getting all the perks of the position without doing the work and taking advantage of the people who supported him. It was something Republican rival Jeb Bush tried to use against his younger opponent during Wednesday's debate.
You know how many votes John McCain missed when he was carrying out that furious comeback that you're now modeling it under?
He wasn't my
No, Jeb, I don't remember. Well, let me tell you, I don't remember you ever complaining about John McCain's vote record. The only reason why you're doing it now is because we're running for the same position, and someone has convinced you that attacking me is going to help you.
All right, still ahead, there's a new leader in the House, what Paul Ryan is saying about taking the gavel. But first, our panel breaks down the GOP debate. A look at the winners, losers, and who should drop out.
You're watching Central Illinois on the Record.
All right, welcome back. Joining the panel this week from the Peoria Journal-Star, Chris Kjaergaard, Dr. Ryan Reed from Bradley University, and Mike Bigger with the Illinois Republican Party. Thank you all for joining me. Of course, this week's topic, while a lot's been going on in politics, we had the GOP debate number 3 for president out in Colorado, hosted by CNBC. Your money, your vote. But not your substance. Mike, what was your first reaction after the debate wrapped up?
I thought it was a fascinating debate, and a lot of the narrative that we've seen after the debate has been to do with the format of it, the moderators, and the exchange between the candidates and the moderators, and how combative it got at times. And I thought it was really a very engaging debate, and I think it kind of started to separate some of the candidates, and I think it's going to start to flush out some of the favorites and some of those that have really little or no chance at this point.
Chris, did you think that in terms of separating the candidates and where they stood on certain positions, that there was a lot of a difference? It seemed to me like there was a lot of bickering back and forth, and it was the candidates who could talk the loudest and have the strongest voice seemed to, in certain cases, do the best.
That's certainly part of it, and you also saw, and a lot of people are talking about some of the other splits that came during the debate. Jeb Bush's challenge to Marco Rubio that's widely perceived to have failed and hurt him in a number of ways. The other thing that's interesting to me is there was, I think, a little bit less discussion after this debate about Donald Trump than there was after the first two debates.
Yeah, what I found very interesting, at least looking back at the numbers, the person who spoke the least, and you just mentioned him, the least amount of talking time, was Jeb Bush. And you're shaking your head down.
Well, you know, Jeb Bush needs to step out in front of this field if he's ever going to get noticed, and unfortunately he missed an opportunity last night to do that. Like you said, he had the least speaking time of any of the candidates on the stage, and you know, he was the one initially what everyone kind of thought, well, he's going to be the nominee, and gosh, so far he sure didn't look like it on the stage last night.
Yeah, he hasn't looked good on the debate stage. He's kind of looked weak, and it didn't help that exchange that he had with Marco Rubio over whether Rubio should resign. And it seems that the analogy is that Bush kind of teed it up for him, and Rubio knocked it out of the park with his response.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, and I think Jeb really hurt himself in this last debate. I think he's increasingly looking weak in the debate format. I don't think it's a good forum for him. I think he's better on the stump and in front of crowds, and I think as the debates go forward, I think it's hurting him much more than it's helping him for sure.
Is Marco Rubio now the front runner?
I'd say that he's the one who's perceived to have the most momentum coming out of it, although I want to address something that Mike said about the format and being good on the stump too, and sort of insert into this something that may have gotten lost before the debate, which is John Kasich's rant, I guess you have to call it, or angry rejoinder to some of the other candidates before the debate, asking the question of what's happened to my party and calling out some of the positions that Ben Carson has taken, that Donald Trump has taken. And I don't know whether that's an appeal to moderates, whether it's just expressing frustration for a lot of people in the party at how far some in the field may be perceived to have wandered. But I thought it was a very interesting approach to take, and over the next couple of weeks it'll be fascinating to see whether he gets traction out of it.
Dr. Reed, do you think that is maybe part of the problem, that you have somebody like Kasich, and really you have Marco Rubio and a Jeb Bush, who seem to be that more mainstream Republican conservative, but people like Ted Cruz really can get traction, Ben Carson, Donald Trump, in a primary situation that tends to lean farther to the right?
Sure, and as I talk to my students about, candidates are asked to do two contradictory things in a race. In the primaries, they need to talk to an audience that's going to be more ideological in either party. They're going to be more ideological. They're going to be more sort of red meat about sort of partisan issues. And then those candidates are going to get a lot of traction there, but then they're going to need to be able to talk to independents when it comes to the general election. So you need to try to find a candidate who can do both of those things. And primary voters are the ones who are left up to judge who's going to be able to do that task.
Mike, you're a member of the state's Republican Party. Speaking from your position and what you're looking at and what the party is looking at here, are you happy with it's a big field of candidates. Obviously, it still needs to be whittled down. There's still a lot of time. Is the party happy with the field that it has and the people who maybe they see as the individuals who should be front runners making it to the end?
I think on balance the party's very happy with the diverse field that we have and the number of people that are involved, and they consider all of them to be candidates that are better than what the Democrats can put up. But I think we're reaching the point where we do need to whittle the field down. I frankly personally think the second tier debate should go away. I think those folks really, their time has passed. They need to get behind a candidate that they can support, that they align with, and I think we're all anxious now to, and I think this debate started to do that. I really see there being kind of two camps. I think the Donald Trump and Ben Carson camp, the totally anti-establishment camp, and I think Ted Cruz fits into that a little bit, even though he's in the Senate. And then you've got Marco Rubio, who also is in the Senate, but also is a first term. And a lot of these guys are willing to buck the system. And in fact, Ted Cruz, criticizes both the Republican leadership and the Democrat leadership. And so I think you've got the establishment, the anti-establishment. I think at the end of the day, we're looking to a way to coalesce behind the leading candidate who actually can win in the general election, which is very important. And so I think we're happy where we've started and where we're heading, but I think now it's time that we whittle it down and get serious about who our nominee is going to be.
All right, well, last question for everyone. We'll just go down the line. So, Dr. Reed, whittling down the candidates, who probably should drop out right now?
Rand Paul.
Chris?
Rand Paul, Chris Christie, Lindsey Graham needs to get out.
I think there's really 5 that should stay in. I think Jeb Bush at this point still stays in. I think he's on life support. I think Ted Cruz, I think Ben Carson, I think Donald Trump, and Marco Rubio. I think the rest really need to take a serious look at what their candidacy is and where they need to go. Carly Fiorina, I think, is still a very viable, very strong candidate, and I think she would be an excellent VP pick for an ultimate nominee. I just don't see her rising to the very top of the ticket at this point.
All right, well, it'll be interesting to see. We've got, of course, another debate in just a couple of weeks, so we'll have to check back in with you gentlemen and see what you think after another go-around. So thank you very much, Mike Bigger, Chris Kergard, Ryan Reed. Thank you. All right, still ahead. Before handing over the gavel, John Boehner makes one last major deal to tell you how it keeps the country open for business. But first, there's a new man in charge of the House, what Paul Ryan has to say about being elected Speaker.
You're watching Central Illinois on the Record.
After weeks of uncertainty, Wisconsin's Paul Ryan is elected Speaker of the House. Ryan takes over for John Boehner as the 54th House Speaker. Thursday morning's vote was merely a formality as House Republicans nominated him for the position on Wednesday. Ryan has said he hopes to unify a sometimes fractured Republican Party while Speaker.
The House is broken. We're not solving problems. We're adding to them. And I am not interested in laying blame. We are not settling scores. We are wiping the slate clean.
Ryan was first elected to the House in 1998 when he was just 28. He was also Mitt Romney's running mate in the 2012 presidential election. As for the former House Speaker John Boehner, he says he's going out the same way he came to Washington.
I leave with no regrets, no burdens. If anything, I leave the way I started. I'm just a regular guy, humbled by the chance to do a big job.
Boehner announced on September 25th he would resign his seat and give up the gavel. He was elected Speaker in 2010 after a Tea Party wave swept Republicans into power in the House. Boehner was elected to the U.S. House in 1990, taking office in 1991. He is the first House Speaker since Tip O'Neill to give up the speakership willingly. Congress avoids a government shutdown by passing a bill that raises the debt ceiling. Andrew Spencer reports opposition, led by 2 presidential contenders, kept the final vote from happening until early Friday morning.
On this vote, the yeas are 64, the nays are 35. 3/5 of the Senate duly chosen and sworn having voted in the affirmative. The motion is agreed to.
It wasn't until after 3 a.m. that the Senate passed the budget deal after opposition from fiscal conservatives in the Senate pushed the chamber into a rare overnight session.
The number one threat to our country's future is our debt.
Senators Rand Paul and Ted Cruz each spoke for hours in a failed attempt to filibuster the bill that 79 Republicans and 187 Democrats in the House passed on Wednesday. The deal raises the government's debt ceiling through March 2017. It also comes with an increase in federal spending of more than $80 billion on military and domestic programs. Paul called the bill the result of an unholy alliance.
On the right, they say, well, we need more money for military. On the left, they say we need more money for welfare. And so they get together, there's a secret handshake, and we spend more money on everything.
10 years from now, we are told $33 billion will be cut in 2025. Well, Mr. President, if you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn, and I have some beachfront property in Arizona for you.
Cruz says nobody in Congress believes those cuts will ever happen. I'm Andrew Spencer, reporting.
President Obama, who still needs to sign the bill, approved of the measure before it cleared the House. Still ahead, Senator Sanders speaks on marijuana, what the presidential candidate has to say about his policy on pot. But first, gambling or strategy? How a lawmaker in Illinois is looking to crack down on fantasy gaming. Daily fantasy sports has become a billion-dollar industry in a matter of years. Some think the surging market has come with a price, and 5 states have banned that style of gaming. One lawmaker in Illinois wants to clamp down, but says he does not want to ban the industry, just make it safer for players to join.
Illinois could be a leader in Illinois, in the country, in developing these standards and be something. This could be a point of pride in how we allow people to enjoy this technology while at the same time protecting players.
The bill would ban players under the age of 18 and help define the companies as gaming. The measure would also try to keep players from becoming addicted, just as casinos and other gaming industries are required to do.
The time is long overdue for us to remove the federal prohibition on marijuana.
Senator Bernie Sanders says states should be able to regulate pot the same way they do alcohol and tobacco. The presidential candidate says, according to the FBI, a person is arrested every minute in the United States on a marijuana charge. Sanders made the comments while speaking from George Mason University to students in online meetings all across the country. That's going to do it for this edition of Central Illinois on the Record. You can stay in touch with us using social media. Connect with WMBD and me on Facebook and Twitter using hashtag CIOTR. We will see you next week.
The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of WMBD, WIZZ, or Nexstar Broadcasting Group.